Happy day everybody, my name is Jeremy and this is Barbecue Elementary. Today I'll be trying my hand at a new recipe inspired by Korean barbecue, smoked wine marinated pork belly. And I'm going to experiment with a few different methods, so get those boots tied tight and let's go. Okay, I recently watched this show on Netflix called Pork Belly Rhapsody, and it totally blew my mind, specifically opening my eyes to the various ways pork belly can be prepared. I was most attracted to the idea of wine marinating pork belly, and I thought to myself, I could smoke that, so here we are. I wanted to see which method of prep would yield the best results, so I took 4 slabs of belly that I had left over from a recent video and decided to slice 2 into strips for burn ends and leave the other 2 whole to smoke like Texas style briskets. I'm pretty sure you could use any kind of red wine for this. This is a red blend from Apothic and I'm using that because that's what I had on me. I decided to cut the belly for burnt ends into strips instead of cubes thanks to Chud's pork belly video. The prep is easier and I think it has a better overall result. Now once the meat was pretty much 100% ready for its long wine marinade, all you have to do is throw them in a bag. You could use a vac seal bag here, but this is what I have on me and I think Ziplocs work perfectly fine. Now I did want to make sure I got all of the air out of the bag that I could. This is mostly to ensure that all of the pork will be covered by wine. And I'd recommend not sparing any wine here. Make sure you use every last drop. Then I used every tool in my arsenal to get most of the air out of the bag, including this itsy bitsy spider technique, and then set both in the fridge for the next 48 hours. After that long, cold sleep, I removed the pork from the bag and patted them dry. The marinade definitely did its job. Each slice and slab was a deep purple, except for the fat, of course, and even in this stage, smelled amazing. It's gorgeous. Once each piece was adequately marveled upon, it was time to whip out the seasoning. For the burn end strips, I decided to use Killer Hogs AP seasoning, which, if you didn't already know, is an all-purpose seasoning comprised of mostly salt, pepper, and garlic. Because the glaze I'll use to turn these strips into burnt ends is going to be a bit decadent, I wanted to go flavorful but simple during this stage. And this is the part that it always seems like a good idea to mention, but just make sure you get your tops, your edges, your sides, your bottoms, your tips, your whatevers. Just make sure you cover the whole piece of meat. For the Texas style pork belly brisket boys, I of course used a mustard binder and a 2-to-1 ratio of black pepper and salt and covered to the best of my abilities. Honestly, black pepper, wine, and salt is usually a pretty sweet combination. I don't think there's any way this will be bad. I think after today I'll permanently be joining Team Use Your Hands for pepper and salt application, as I'm starting to hate shakers altogether. In spite of that bottle being the absolute worst, I got the bellies all rubbed down and ready to go on the pit, which I preheated to 250 degrees. In order to ramp up the flavor just a little bit, as well as keep the babies moist, I decided to use 1 part soy sauce and 1 part water spritz and use only when necessary. Now I've heard it said a million different ways, but I think how are you cooking if you ain't looking is especially apt in this case. With slabs this small, I wanted to make sure I wasn't cooking too fast, so I checked on the meat about every 30 to 45 minutes and spritzed when it looked a little bit dry, which was pretty close to every single time. After a couple 5 trips at the smoker, it was about time to yank the burn ends off and apply the glaze. In my journey of pork belly discovery, I decided to try to make a gochujang glaze for my burn ends. Gochujang is a Korean red pepper paste that's widely used for almost any food, including pork belly. So, I started with 1/4 cup of gochujang, 1/4 cup of honey, 1/2 of a cup of brown sugar, 1/4 cup of mushroom soy sauce a la Derby BBQ, and 1/4 cup of rice vinegar, and mixed it all up. With the gochujang giving it a nice spice, the honey and brown sugar giving it a great sweetness, the rice vinegar giving it a tang, and mushroom soy sauce giving it umami and color, this sauce was perfect for this application. About 4 hours into the cook, I took the strips to just around 201 degrees until they were nice and probe tender. I then cut them into about 3 cubes per strip and noticed an amazing purple wine ring. After they are all cut up, I toss them in a foil pan with the glaze and put them back into the pit for another hour or so. It'll be important to note that you don't want to over or under sauce with the glaze at this stage. You want it to look like you dipped each piece individually and let the excess run off. This is so you get a nice, tacky, flavor-filled surface without getting too soupy. Once the brisket style bellies had reached a probe tender temperature about 4.5 hours into the cook, I pulled them from a pit, admired the perfect bark I'd formed, and wrapped them individually in foil to rest for about 30 minutes more. This rest is particularly important for pork belly because at this point they'd be a little too tender to slice well. After about an hour of letting the glaze set in the smoker, the burn ends were done and it was finally time to plate them all and, of course, take a little bite. And oh boy, were they on point. The sweet, spice, acid, salt, and umami aligned and made for a really dynamic yet balanced flavor that I actually don't think I've ever tasted. And the wine gave an elegant undertone of sweet and savory that kind of rounded out the succulent fat of the belly. The brisket style was obviously a little more nuanced. The fat was perfectly rendered, which made for an amazing tender bite, and because salt and pepper were the only spices I used, the wine stood out beautifully. In all, I'm pretty proud and pumped on both of these recipes. I think they both worked incredibly well and I'll definitely return to them, they were that good. But the gochujang burn ends were by far my favorite of the two, with the spice of the gochujang and the tackiness of the glaze giving them a huge advantage in the end. As always, thanks a million for tuning in. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already to follow me along on my adventures through Barbecue Elementary. Oh yeah.